Hi there, this is Lisa Wilcox listening to Rocktober on Rock Video Rental.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to Rock Video Rental. And it is the best time of year, at least in my mind. And we're talking about Rocktober. It's going to be our fourth year of doing this. And no, we're not going to talk about the 80s slash movie Rocktober Blood. We're going to be covering the entire Nightmare on Elm Street series. And I thought it was about time we did that because we've already done Friday 13th and Halloween. So it was really the logical next one to cover. And I know Caleb has seen none of these.
That's correct.
So I always feel like that's kind of an interesting dynamic that we have with these kind of movies where I've seen them countless times and you've never seen them.
hmm
So
I think
that was a
honestly,
good thing to do.
yeah, because we did the other series. I think the only one that I watched, other than the ones we watched for this show, maybe ahead of time, was Jason X. I think that was like the only one that I'd watched, which is extremely terrible for perspective, but
Oh man. Yeah, this series Nightmare on Elm Street is it's got its similarities to Friday the 13th and Halloween, but I don't know, they're also different from each other. You know that like every single slasher movie pretty much is owes something to Halloween.
hmm
And then, Friday the 13th got to put it in the stratosphere. So uh Nightmare on Elm Street was kind of like brought slasher movies back because they started really falling in the mid 80s where it's like, okay, all these Halloween and Friday the 13th ripoffs are starting to get old, and Nightmare on Elm Street kind of threw something new on the screen. So, and it blew up after that.
yeah, no, absolutely. Are we just jumping into it? Or are you giving the plot and everything? Because like,
Yeah, I might as well cover that now. So we're starting off with Nightmare on Elm Street. It's from 1984. It's directed by Wes Craven. And the plot is teenager Nancy Thompson must uncover the dark truth concealed by her parents after she and her friends become targets of a spirit of a serial killer with a bladed glove in their dreams, in which if they die, it kills them in real life.
yeah. So what I was gonna say before letting you to the plot and everything is of course not being well versed in the horror genre but I think we've had the conversation before, just like such a unique and really original idea um for somebody it's a horror villain, but they kill you in your dream. Like that's
Yeah.
like a layer on top of a layer of fear.
Yeah, it really brings a different dynamic to the movie.
hmm
And what works so well about Halloween it is that the killer comes to an everyday, normal, safe neighborhood and starts taking people out one by one. And that's terrifying within itself. And then Friday the 13th, cranked it up a notch because it's like, oh, you're going to summer camp.
Have
And
fun.
yeah, like you're away from a whole bunch of people, and then like a crazy person starts killing a bunch of people. And then Nightmare on Elm Street's even higher than that because it's like, okay, it's like now if you go to sleep, you're gonna die. And everybody has to sleep.
Yeah.
you know and that's what I always really enjoyed about these movies and found, I guess, more scary because there was never a part in my life even as a kid where I found Friday the 13th scary,
Okay.
where Nightmare on Elm Street, the first time I saw that, like, it scared me as a kid.
Did you ever go to summer camp?
No.
Oh. We'll see. Jeez. No.
Maybe that's why. And I
Yeah.
have slept before, even though my youngest daughter thinks I shouldn't. But
Yeah. No,
yeah,
yeah, this
these movies always had, especially the first one. I mean, you'll see as we get farther into it that they kind of lose that edge. But
yeah, I feel like I could have watched quite a few of these movies for Halloween and Friday the 13th when I was, before I watched them when I was younger and things like that. But this one easily, if I'd watched it too early, could have haunted me.
dude, I remember the first time seeing part of Nightmare on Elm Street. I might have been like 5 years old.
Gosh.
I was at like this friend of my parents' house, and they were like watching my brother and I while my parents went off and did something. And I remember their daughter being like, how they either had Nightmare on Elm Street on VHS or they rented it. And they're like, oh, like you have to see this. And like they showed the part towards the end where Freddy's on fire. I remember seeing that part
Oh man.
like at a really young age. And like, I remember that having them turn it off. So like I wasn't scared at the moment, but I thought I was going to get scared. So I had them turn it off.
Oh man.
But yeah, I guess before we get too far, I can go with the cast here.
Mm.
We got Heather Langenkamp as Nancy, Johnny Depp in one of his first movies as Glenn, Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger, John Saxon as Lieutenant Thompson, Ronnie Blakely as Marge Thompson, Amanda Weiss as Tina, and I don't know how to say this guy's first name. I think it's Zoo Garcia as Rod.
Rock.
But yeah, I've seen this movie countless times. I don't even know how to ballpark it. We always joke when we're telling people like, "Oh, I've seen that movie thousands of times or a million times or something like that." And in all honesty, have you ever seen any movie thousands of times?
No, I mean I can't. I don't. I would maybe say I've seen a movie at most like 50 times, but I don't think I've cracked 3 digits.
Yeah. You and I have had a conversation before on an episode where we talked about movies that we've seen the most in our life.
Hmm.
And this was on my list. It doesn't come close to how many times I've seen the Ninja Turtles movies, but probably one of my most watched horror movies for sure. This and the original Halloween. Uh,
Yeah.
let's just dive in like we normally do. I mean, everybody kind of knows the story behind this. It's one of the most popular movies, even of any genre. Um, but things that are good. This is one of those movies where like I think there's so many things that are done so well that they borderline are mostly great. I feel like it's got high highs and lower lows, and there's really not a lot for the quote unquote good. But I had Amanda Weiss as Tina. I thought was really good.
Hmm.
I thought she was better than Heather Langenkamp in this movie.
Okay, yeah, thank you, dude. I
Yeah.
I have that down because I was gonna say I almost would have rather seen Tina be the main girl than Nancy.
What this is reminiscent of for me is Psycho,
Okay.
where in Psycho you get Janet Leigh and like, okay, Janet Leigh is going to be my main character.
Hmm.
This is who we're following because we start off following Amanda Weiss's Tina, and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, this is the main girl here, and then she dies like what 15, 20 minutes into the movie,
They
and
did.
now all of a sudden we're following Nancy.
Yeah, they did not hold back. That was one thing I had down where like they just went straight in. I know a lot of horror movies start off with like some kind of like, scary s thing to get, but dude, they may have started off with like the biggest kill scene in the
Yeah,
first.
yeah, and
So,
it's genuinely like disturbing
mhm.
because of how much she screams and like the sheer like terror in her face
Yeah.
when
Well,
she's getting dragged around on the ceiling.
yeah, the thing too, that was part of the reason why I just never really got around to this, and I've kind of said it before. The one thing that I've never personally had an interest in, I think I've seen like one or two movies, is like the concept of like possession.
Yeah,
And I know this wasn't exactly it, but younger me would not have been able to, or really made the difference there and everything. But the whole thing about her like flying around the room and being like on the ceiling and everything, like that was like, I mean, you're talking about Exorcist esque content there.
Yeah.
So
And the way they did that special effect is really kind of cool. So it that room is set like on a big wheel basically. And they could move that room around, like rotate it. So
okay,
when she goes up on a ceiling, she's actually, the ceiling's on the floor, and it's
gotcha.
just like the way it's shot that they're able to like flip it around. I don't that actually that entire set was used in the movie The Stuff, which is another horror movie
Hmm.
about this white slimy ooze stuff that like kills people, which it's actually pretty fun movie. But yeah, it was used in that one as well. But this movie is really low budget. It was made for less than $2 million.
Hmm.
So the fact that they were able to do something that effective and like something like that was never seen before. Other than like you talked about The Exorcist and things like that, but
But yeah, well, that was the thing too, that it was really cool that you shared that, because I was wondering how they did that, because I was looking at it, and I was just like, dude, I don't see any wires or anything. So I don't know what they did, but they did a pretty darn good job doing it.
yeah, I'll say a great companion piece for this movie. They did a one of the movies that made us based on this on
Hmm.
Netflix, and then there's also a super long documentary. It's like probably 5 hours long. I talked about the Crystal Lake Memories, the Friday 13th one. They also have one for Nightmare on Elm Street. It's called Never Sleep Again,
Okay.
and it's got like interviews with Wes Craven and like all the actors throughout the series, and they explain how they did like some of the stuff they did.
Hmm.
And they have like a picture from the outside of this set that spins around and everything, and like how they're shooting it. It's pretty cool. Um,
Rock.
yeah, I felt like going back at Amanda Weiss as her. I like you said, I always feel like she should have been the final girl, like the main character. But she was so good as Tina, and then like in that death scene was so effective that I don't feel like Heather Langenkamp could have brought that kind of performance to that.
Hmm. Yeah, no, it well, just some kind of funny things with that and everything. Because you there's two ways of looking at it. It's either like, okay, you have that big splash entrance where it's like, oh, this crazy dramatic kill scene with great acting and all that, or and then you have the story dragged out by kind of a more plain Jane actress,
Yeah,
or you flip it and you have the more dynamic actress for the entirety of the movie, but then you don't start the movie off with such a big splash.
yeah. Not
So
not as big of a splash as that Johnny Depp had in this movie. A
right.
literal splash,
Yeah.
a geyser. But
Mm.
speaking of Johnny Depp, he's the other thing I had that I thought was good. Um, it was kind of believable. Like you could kind of see it that he was gonna end up being something, just the way he was in this movie. Because I think this is his first feature movie.
Yeah.
If it's not, it's maybe a second movie. But it's the role of Glenn, Nancy's boyfriend. I thought he was pretty good. He had a good sense of humor and I don't know, just believable as like the boy next door, like nice guy who's also like as a kid I never really noticed this, but as an adult I noticed this how um Nancy in typical final girl fashion is kind of like you said plain Jane and kind of straight laced
Hmm.
and Glenn is her boyfriend, of course, like wants to do it with her, and like she denies him, and then they show them like laying in bed, and she's laying in bed with the scene where Freddy pushes into the wall, knocks a crucifix off the wall,
Hmm.
and then they like show Glenn, and he's just like laying there wide awake. Like that cracks me up because they don't even like sleep in the same bed, even though they sleep over at Tina's house,
Yeah.
and that's before the whole scene of Tina dying. Well, it cracks me up too because you can hear Tina and Rod like loudly having sex, and they show Glenn and he's just sitting like laying there so pissed off, which I didn't notice until probably like a year or so ago when I watched this. And I kind of pieced that together. I'm like, oh, that's kind of a funny, subtle thing.
Hmm.
And I thought the guy who played Rod did a pretty decent job too for the role he was given. But at least like they gave him like a little bit of background and a little bit of personality before they kill him off, which was kind of one of the downfalls of the Friday the 13th series, where it's just like, here's a bunch of characters that are going to die.
Yeah.
Especially when you get to like Friday the 13th part 5, where it's like, here's a new character, he's dead. Here's a new
Well,
character, and she's gone.
I was I actually had it down, and I I had it as actually Rod's character being kind of interesting because I felt like the Rod character was really weird because he seemed kind of, I don't know, would you call it aggressive
Yeah.
with Tina?
Yeah, I get the kind of feeling that he's maybe from like a rough home. And then maybe he's one of those guys that acts out to get attention.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I think we all know those kind of guys in school who maybe they don't do very well in school, but it's not because of lack of intelligence. It's because either they get bored or they just want attention.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of the way he is. But yeah, aggressive would be a good way to put him.
Yeah. Well, like
An
that
alpha
might not.
male.
Yeah, that might not be the best word, but yeah, it was just it was a little unusual. And it moved so fast with him and Tina at the beginning. It was kind of like, okay, like are they in a relationship? Are they not? Like what is going on?
Yeah. Where like, are they dating or are they just kind of like having a good time? It's never really fully explored.
Hmm.
We get the scene where she's talking about her dream and everything, walking to school, and then um he says something about he's like, "Oh, I had a heart on this morning that had your name on it," and she's like, "There's not enough room on your joint for my name," but which is kind of funny, just like a back and forth.
Hmm.
But
A little bit better dialogue than the first Halloween.
yeah, totally. Maybe I feel like I talked about this when we did Halloween and Friday the 13th, where I feel like the first Halloween movie is better than any movie in the 3 series. Like in those 3 like major slasher series, that's
Hmm.
a better movie than any of those. Where I feel like this one might come the closest of like how it's shot, how it's handled, the plot especially. Like that was what I had for great is that the freaking plot for this movie, like you said, to have that idea of a killer that can kill you in your dreams when you're most
Hmm.
vulnerable
Yeah.
is just an amazing idea. And
Yeah.
that's one of those where if you had that idea, you wouldn't share it with anybody, so no one would steal it until you could do something with it.
Oh yeah, totally. Like that. Everybody at some point in time in their life is like, oh, I've got a good idea. But that, I mean, that one you just know, you just know that that's a good one.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure. And then the whole character of Freddy Krueger, I mean, he's iconic. Robert Englund did an amazing job playing Freddy, and he keeps like that quality of performance almost like through the whole series.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like Robert Englund's really kind of underrated as an actor because I've seen him in other things too that isn't Nightmare on Elm Street, and he's always good in everything.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is that is kind of interesting about this because it's just like they could have just had a killer in your dreams,
Yeah.
but they had Freddy Krueger, who is much more beyond that and makes it way more interesting. And so it's just kind of crazy because they could have done it without specifically Freddy Krueger, and it still would have been probably really good, but because of that concept, in your dreams. But with that character that they developed, then it just takes it to a whole nother level.
Yeah. And just, I mean, the looks of him, just, the horribly burnt face instead of wearing a mask. And he's much more expressive by default than Jason or Michael because he's not wearing a mask. The whole idea of him using his glove as a weapon with the long knives on it
Hmm.
is just another genius move. And I feel like it was like one thing after another that's kind of fell into place for this character to make it to what it was and how he became like a pop culture icon. Similar in a way of Jason and Michael did too, but like Freddy lends himself to having much more personality, and he's like the only one of those three that talks,
Hmm.
which is why it's so hard to recast Freddy Krueger,
Oh
which we'll
yeah.
find out later on in the series
Hmm.
when they did the remake.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and, the other thing I had is great too is the whole Tina's death scene,
Oh yeah,
which
absolutely.
I
Well,
can
like
cover
I don't want to say it's like the pinnacle, but that like but it's kind of like maybe one of the highlights.
yeah, I would say so. I would say that, and then towards the end where Nancy pulls Freddy out of the dream and has everything set up like the booby traps and everything.
Hmm.
That's always a really cool part, I thought. Um, I
Yeah,
guess
but
I'll get into the rest of the kills because there's really not many in this movie,
okay.
and then we'll get into like scenes and stuff because I feel like that would goes right into it. So we talked about Tina getting slashed and thrown around the room. Um, and then Rod, he gets arrested for murdering Tina, and obviously it wasn't him. We all know that, except for the people in the movie don't know what's going on. He gets hung by Freddy, and it's one of those two where it's like you don't see who's doing it, and it just kind of happens.
Hmm.
And the sheet goes around his neck, hangs him in a cell. And then Johnny Depp's one always made me laugh because it's so absurd. Where he's like laying in his bed watching TV, and he gets pulled down into his bed, and then an eruption, like a geyser of blood, just shoots out of the bed. It
A
like
little over the
saturates
top.
everything. Yeah. And then I've heard other people talk about this too. So in the world of this movie, how does he die? What kills him?
Was it in the real world or was it dreaming?
Well, yeah, but I mean, like in the real world, when the cops showed up and there's blood all over the place and there's no body, like,
Dis-
how do they explain that one away? His bed turned into a wood chipper,
Disintegration?
I guess. Spontaneous dental hydroplosion, which is an offense reference. I hope somebody picked up on that. Um, and then the last death, we got Nancy's mom gets burned to death, and then she kind of just falls into the abyss, the dream-like abyss from Freddy, which I
Yeah,
always thought was kind of an interesting effect. It's a little dated now, but our
but
body just kind of sinks down into the bed.
but then she came back.
Yeah, at the end. But
Yeah,
was
but
that a dream? I'm like,
well,
technically, she did die.
did you cover all of them? Was that the last one?
Yeah, that was the last one.
Okay, because that's kind of my biggest thing with this, because like I don't really know exactly what was going on and at what point was real and what wasn't. So it's just
Yeah.
like, did some of those really happen or not? But then also on top of that, the other thing that I had to talk to you about was the whole bathtub thing,
Yeah.
because it's just like she woke up and was calling for her mom, but was still being pulled in.
Yeah.
So what was up with that? Because once you wake up, you're awake.
Dude, if you're getting confused now by Nightmare on Elm Street, you just wait until the sequels.
Oh,
I
great.
remember I watched, especially the next one. That one like has some blurred lines between the rules of the um that the movie creates, where it's just like, okay, you're contradicting yourself kind of thing. But I don't know, I kind of took it as like, Nancy falls asleep in a tub, Freddy pulls her under. That's another really iconic shot of the Freddy's claw reaching up between her legs.
Hmm.
Um, and then she gets pulled in. Also, that's a body double too. That's not Heather Langenkamp naked in that one split second. Um, and then she's screaming for her mom. I feel like she starts yelling for her mom and then she wakes up. I don't know, like the classic kind of night terror thing, where you've heard people say, I woke up screaming.
Okay.
And that's what I kind of see it as. Like she's yelling for her mom, and then she wakes up partway through it, and that's when she like pops up back to the surface, like fully.
Okay.
That's the way I took it.
Yeah, I could kind of see that. I just couldn't remember for sure because I didn't go back and look if like her eyes were open at any point in time.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So the kills in this movie, we've talked about, I think pretty much all of them, but to wrap them up quickly, we get Tina gets slashed and thrown around her room. Rod gets hanged in his cell. Glenn gets pulled into his bed and a geyser of blood erupts. And then Marge gets burnt to death and falls into the abyss of her bed.
so is that only four?
That is only four.
Interesting. I
Yeah,
feel like,
Freddy doesn't have as big of a kill count as like Jason and Michael do,
yeah. Is that the
especially
least?
Jason.
I feel like that's the least for any of these movies for Rocktober marathons.
I don't know. The original Halloween only has a couple.
Yeah, I feel like it had more than that. Anyways, just a
Maybe.
thought that popped into my head.
Yeah, it's easily one of the lowest for sure. Um, and then this quote, I don't, every time I hear it, it makes me laugh. It just stands out to me this time, so I gotta share it. Um, there's a part where Nancy's talking to her mom, and um, Nancy says something about, "Oh, it's not anything serious," and she's like, "Maybe you don't take murder seriously." How could you say I don't take murder seriously? It's so awkward how it's delivered. Like I said, the mom is not a good actress. It's
Yeah.
very rough in this movie, I feel like. And especially it's hard, I feel like, for actors to play like they're drunk. I think
Mhm.
Van Damme is a good example of that in Kickboxer. But yeah, Ronnie Blakely as Marge Thompson in this does a pretty rough job too.
Yeah, I can see that. So
Yeah, she
no,
was rough. I thought John Saxon was really good because I just like John Saxon,
mm,
the the dad.
yeah. Well, the talking about the kills real quick, because I know we talked about it a little bit, and this kind of feeds into the ending of the movie a little bit, kind of not deliberately going there, but the mom's death slash not death thing was super weird. And I know we already talked about how I've only seen this once, and so some of it's confusing to me, so maybe you understand it better, or maybe I'm just a noob, whatever. Go ahead, call me that. um
No, the ending is one of the biggest flaws of this movie, but continue.
yeah, like, well, because she died, And then they transition to her back with her mom, and it's bright and sunshiny out. Like, and this goes back to what I already said. I mean, technically, at some certain point in time, like she could have started sleeping, and for all we know, she could have been sleeping this whole thing.
Oh man, how horrible that would have been for an ending.
Yeah. So I kind of question on how much was that.
Yeah.
Like Johnny Depp's character, Glenn. Like at one point in time, I was kind of thinking, like, well, did he really die, or was that just part of the sleeping? I'm pretty convinced that he died and all that. But yeah, like you even alluded to, the end. I don't even really know what to say about the end.
Yeah, it's a hodgepodge and it's kind of stitched together, which I've got something more about that in trivia and facts, so I guess I could just jump right into those if you don't have anything else.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I'll start with the ending one here first. So in the original script, the movie had a happy ending. Nancy kills Freddy by ceasing to believe in him, and then awakens to discover that everything had happened in the movie was just an elongated nightmare.
Oh, thank you for not doing
Yeah.
that.
She then says goodbye to her mom and drives to school with her friends. However, Robert Shea, who was the producer for this, wanted a twist ending that would leave it open for sequels. He suggested fooling the audience into thinking Freddy was dead, only to reveal in the final scene itself that it's actually a nightmare. And at the end of the film, Freddy was driving the car away from the house with the kids screaming. Uh, Wes, Craven, Wes Craven hated the idea. Um, and then ultimately, four endings were filmed. Craven's happy ending, Shay's Freddy ending, and two versions of a compromise ending Craven and Shay had reached, in which Nancy's mother is pulled back into the house, but the audience is left slightly ambiguous to what is going on. Um, Craven has always maintained that the film should have had the happy ending that he originally wrote.
No,
Yeah,
no. I have a hard time with the happy ending. Um,
I kind of just like the ending of Freddy's driving a car to leave it
yeah.
open for a sequel.
Yeah, well, like the whole thing about like bringing the mom back, I think was one of the more confusing things.
Yeah,
Because like they basically were trying to convince you and have you be like, okay, reality is Nancy's mom and Lieutenant Thompson's wife was killed by Freddy, which actually makes sense because Freddy
mm.
should have kind of had a vendetta against her because of her involvement in everything, blah 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 blah, whatever. But
Well, it
then
should have
all
way should have ended as her skeleton or whatever goes into the bed. Then that's it. Freddy's dead, he's gone, and then just have like Nancy like fall to the floor and cry, and then just have it go to black from there or something.
yeah.
Like
I,
and like her dad rushes in and like consoles her, and they could even do um like a zoom out of the house or something like Halloween instead of how at the end of Halloween where they had Michael breathing faintly in the background.
mhm.
They could have just had like the little girls with the jump rope singing the Freddy Krueger song or something and end it like that.
Or they could have ended with "I shot him 6 times." No, but
You
yeah,
don't know what death is.
I you don't know what a nightmare is. Um, yeah, I really don't know, but the fact that they brought her mom back just like totally threw me off, and I think I was focusing more on that than what wound up happening with them in the car and everything. Which a little bit of credit to him, the whole fact of the whole like Freddy Krueger coloring of the topper
Yeah.
that went down. It's just like, okay, a little credit there. That was kind of like a nice little touch, but all in all, I think we're on the same page where it's just like it was clunky.
Yeah. At best.
Yeah.
Yeah. The mom's like, I'm back and I'm not on the liquor anymore. I'm good to go. Um, so other trivia here. New Line Cinema was saved from bankruptcy by the success of this film, and was jokingly nicknamed the house that Freddy built.
Hmm.
So Heather Langenkamp's boyfriend at the time of the shooting is credited for creating the Freddy nursery rhyme that the
Oh,
little girls with the jump rope sing, and that continues through the entire series. So
nice.
props to him.
I bet he probably didn't get what
You can get crap for
residuals
it. Pat on
or
the back.
yeah. He probably got a little something up front, and then he should have marked it down where every time you use it, you give me $1 or something.
Right. So all the boiler room footage um, in the movie was shot in the basement of the Lincoln Heights jail in Los Angeles, which was condemned shortly after production wrapped due to high levels of asbestos.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah. So Wes Craven first came up with the idea for the movie from a series of articles in the LA Times over a 3-year period about a group of Southeast Asian refugees, several of whom died in the throes of a horrific nightmares. The
Whoa.
group had come to the U.S. to escape the murderous reign of Pol Pot. Within a year of arriving, 3 men died, all in similar situations. The young, otherwise healthy man would have a nightmare, then refuse to sleep for as long as he could. When he finally fell asleep from exhaustion, he awoke screaming and then died. The autopsy results revealed that he did not died from heart failure, but just simply died. Uh, it was this inability to find out the cause of death that intrigued Craven so much. Medical authorities have since called the phenomenon Asian death syndrome, a variant of sudden unexpected death syndrome and Brugada syndrome.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I heard too that when that last refugee died, they looked in his closet and he had like um a coffee pot like in his closet that
Huh.
he would just like drink coffee basically to stay awake because he was so afraid to go to sleep.
Weird. That would suck to be afraid to go to sleep.
Yeah, pretty scary. So the scene where Freddy's arms elongate were achieved by having men with fishing poles on each side of the alley operating a set of puppet arms attached to Robert Englund, which I
Nice.
always thought that scene was a little goofy.
Yeah, it was a little goofy. Like there was a little bit of like I get it. I get the terror with it, but at the same time it was well, I mean that's what you get with the practical effects. So
Yeah. So in the original script, Freddy was actually a child molester. However, the decision was made to change him into just a child murderer to avoid accusations of exploiting a series of child molestations in California around the time of production. He was rewritten as a child molester in a 2010 remake starring Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy Krueger. And I almost feel like I have to repeat that because there's so many people that always say that Freddy was a child molester. I was like, no, he wasn't. That was the original script and it was rewritten, and he wasn't in the first movie.
well, I mean, child murder still pretty bad.
Yeah, it's
So
bad enough. Like, and then well, we'll get to that remake, believe me, and I'll have lots of things to say about that. Um, but yeah, people just like, oh, that's what he was originally. No, that was a choice in the remake to go back to that. So Heather Langenkamp beat over 200 actresses for the role of Nancy Thompson. Among them are Jennifer Grey, Demi Moore, Courtney Cox, Tracy Gold, and Claudia Wells.
Demi Moore.
Yeah, pops up in a lot of stuff we talk about. So Charlie Sheen, John Cusack, Brad Pitt, Kiefer Sutherland, Nicolas Cage, and C. Thomas Howell were all considered for the role of Glenn.
Nicolas Cage.
Yeah. Brad Pitt was actually in a slasher movie.
Yeah.
A few years later, it was called Cutting Class. And it's really not that great. But it's got Jill Schoelen in it. She's pretty cool. So the original glove of Freddy was later used in A Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge, which we'll be talking about next. Was also seen hanging on the wall of the woodshed in Evil Dead 2. This was a response to the use of Evil Dead 1 on the television screen in Nightmare on Elm Street, and a part of the continued banter between directors Wes Craven and Sam Raimi. However, when Craven loaned the glove to the Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors set, it got lost, and it was rumored to be in possession of Robert Englund's agent. So, yeah. One of the main reasons that Johnny Depp was chosen was because Wes Craven's daughter thought that he was, quote, dreamy, and threatened to run away from home if he wasn't cast in the movie. So the film cost roughly $1.8 million to produce, of which only $57,000 was reserved for the ambitious special effects. The effects designer Jim Doyle accepted anyway because he was desperate for work. The movie made its entire budget back in the opening weekend.
Nice.
Yeah. That's pretty impressive what they were able to do with $57,000 for effects.
Yeah.
So Wes Craven's original concept for Freddy was considerably more gruesome, with teeth showing through the flesh over the jaw, pus running from the sores, and a part of the skull showing from his head. Makeup artist David B. Miller argued that the actor couldn't convincingly be made up that way, and a puppet would be hard to film and wouldn't blend well with the live actors, so these ideas were eventually abandoned. The makeup, though, did take 3 hours to get on Robert Englund every day.
Oof.
Yeah. Amanda Weiss was handing out candy at her mom's house on Halloween following the film's release and was surprised to see so many trick-or-treaters dressed as Freddy. She eventually told one of them that she played Tina in the movie, but no one believed her.
Right.
Yeah. Like, yeah, okay, this girl handing out candy.
Shut up, woman.
Shut up, Meg. So in the original script, Freddy's famous red and green sweater was actually red and yellow. Based on the colors worn by Plastic Man, who, like Freddy, could change his form. The idea is whatever Freddy changed into would be red and yellow. However, Wes Craven read an article in Scientific American in '82 that said the two most contrasting colors for the human retina were red and green, and he decided to alter the colors. So the words Elm Street are actually never spoken at all during the movie.
Oh, that's interesting.
So Freddy Krueger has less than 7 minutes of total screen time in this.
That's interesting too.
That's a lot like Jaws.
Yeah.
So over 500 gallons of fake blood were used during the filming. And
Yeah,
I bet you a lot of it went towards Johnny Depp's death.
Right.
And then the last thing I got is this movie had a $1.8 million budget, and it made 25.6 in the box office.
1.8 and 25.6, did you say?
Yep.
Fuck.
And now grades. IMDb, Rotten Tomatoes, what are they?
IMDb 6.1.
It is a 7.4.
Oh, holy crap! I was way off.
Yeah.
Rotten Tomato critic, let's go with 82%.
95.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
Wow, what was the last 95 we had?
I don't even know.
The last 90%, 92% was the original Rocky. What? Come on. Come on.
I think it's just because the idea is so original.
Okay.
The script is so original.
All right. That's come on. Okay. What? At least The Godfather beat this thing out.
Yeah.
So did freaking E.T. apparently. Rotten Tomato audience, 92%.
84.
Oh, geez.
I'm kind of shocked that the audience is lower than the critic.
Yeah, that doesn't happen too much.
So I guess I'll go first. This is one of my favorite movies. I've seen it countless times. I've owned it on probably every platform I can think of. Like I had it on VHS, I had it on DVD. I guess I didn't have it on Blu-ray, so there's that. I have it on Laserdisc, so that was what I watched it on this time.
Wow.
Um, and usually around Halloween, I always end up watching this movie because my wife actually enjoys this one. So I'll be like, "You want to watch a scary movie?" She's like, "Yeah, let's watch Nightmare on Elm Street." And it's always like she only likes the first one, so we've seen this one a whole bunch of times. But good cast, great acting from Robert Englund, and some pretty solid acting from John Saxon. Um, just iconic movie, and it really brought like the slasher movie back because we had the whole slasher boom starting off with Halloween. Then a bunch of Halloween ripoffs came out, and Friday 13th took it to a new level. Got the subgenre like super popular, and then by the time like 1983 came around, like the slasher movie was starting to die off a little bit because there was so many like Friday the 13th and Halloween ripoffs,
Mm.
where Nightmare on Elm Street added a different like supernatural element to it and just brought the whole genre back again. So, um, yeah, like I said, iconic movie. So I had to give it a 5 out of 5. There wasn't really anything less I could give this movie.
Wow.
What about you?
Well, I have no idea what to expect moving forward from here, so I'm kind of basing this off of this movie alone. I do know that from the brief things that you've said that there is quite a bit of downhill to expect with some of the ones coming up. But I I I'm definitely gonna have to go with what you even said that the critics may have been looking at, where just the originality of this film, and that was probably one of the biggest things for me. I mean, I knew the premise well before I watched this movie. Even though this was a first time watch for me, I'm familiar with the idea, the concept. I don't know all the details. I mean, I knew he was a child murderer. I didn't know the background of the child rapist and that whole back and forth kind of thing through the series. But I mean, uh, originality and honestly, like for how much they're, I'll still go back to the beginning was intense. Like they just slap you in the face right away with how intense this movie is going to be, and then they draw it out a little bit, but um they get really creative with it. The practical effects, while some of it was maybe a little bit clunky, really enjoyable. Um, they, it's just really, even though there's some confusion on what might be a dream and what might not be a dream, I can't really take away from the movie for some of those small shortcomings. It's not glaringly bad where you're just like, "Oh, this changes this movie. It's not as good as it could have been." Um, uh, like basically for this movie to be better, I feel like you'd be asking for perfection practically.
Yeah,
So I am more than good with giving this a 5 out of 5 as well. So
rock.
it'll be interesting to kind of see how it goes moving forward. This is usually how it goes with all the series, just because like I don't know what the lowest low is going to be. Don't give me any hints.
Yeah,
So the next ones are going to be interesting. But it seems like with most of these, we especially saw with Halloween. You know, the first one was easily one, if not the best. I can't remember all of the Friday the 13th because it varied so much in that one, so I might have to kind of go back and look. But yeah, usually they start off really strong and then it's kind of like you said, a roller coaster. So
yeah. I will say that typically this one and one of the others in this series um ends up being people's favorite of the entire series. So it's either one of those two. I won't tell you what the other one is. I'll let you be surprised by it.
Freddy versus
Um,
Jason, no, just
no.
kidding.
I don't know. Are we going to cover that this time? Because we already covered it with Friday the 13th.
We
But
didn't plan. I think we'll put that as like a bonus thing. Like if time allows for it, we'll do it and
yeah,
we'll put it in order. But if not, I mean, you guys can go back and listen to Freddy versus Jason and the other ones. So
yeah. Rock. Well, we got an interesting installment coming up next time, and we're going to be talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street 2: Freddy's Revenge. Kind of a somewhat controversial movie. Um, one of the few slash movies that has a final boy in it instead of a final girl. Um, and there's a lot of interesting undertones to that movie. I don't really want you to do any research on it. I want you to go in blindly and see if you can figure out what was going on with it. um,
I
but
typically do. I typically try not to get prepared in any way for the movies, just to get the initial reactions.
yeah, I'll tell you that the second one's probably been analyzed more than any other movie in a series.
Interesting.
So just because of the undertones to it. But we'll talk about that next time. But until then, as always, be kind and rewind.